All right. So what the last video is going to be, at least in this series, is we're going to be taking a moment to take the one side of our mesh and bring it to the other side. Now, with the exception of the hair, which we basically took a moment to finish, the rest of this does need to go to the other side. So this is where things are going to get a little bit tricky. And there's multiple ways we can approach this. My recommendation for everyone here, just to be a little bit more on the safe side, is we're going to be basically doing duplicate special and bring it to the other side like so. Now, before you do this, I would strongly recommend, if you haven't been keeping track of your verts, like for example, if one goes to the side a little bit like so, make sure that all the ones that are in the middle over here have a value for the x to be absolute 0. Here's the reason why you want to kind of avoid having anything, even if it's slightly off, like for example, like 0.2 or something like that. Doesn't seem like it's going to cause that much of a problem. But when we eventually do this, now you don't have to follow along with this, I just want to give a brief demonstration. If I was to basically make a copy over here and then bring this to the other side, like so, you now have a big hole right in that area. So yes, taking the time to make sure that the verts are dead in the center for each of these parts is important. And to be blunt, it's way easier to do when the poly count's relatively low than trying to make that do it when the poly count is bigger. So if you need a moment, just pause this video, make sure all your verts are at 0, and then you can go to the next step. So I'll just give you a moment. Now, one of the things that we do have to do before we actually bring these up, and this is something that we didn't have a chance to do previously, but we're going to do now, we basically need to fix up this little part over here. Now, if you've already fixed this up on your own, kudos to you. If you haven't, this is how you could basically fix this up. Now, the good news is it's not horribly difficult to wrap this part up. All we should need to do is just a little bit of cutting and welding and cutting again, and that's pretty much it. So this is how you would get started. Number one, you basically would make a cut where this is going to be coming in, which is going to be right here, and you're going to intentionally make a triangle. This seems weird, but I'm going somewhere with this, I promise. And you hit return. Now, as you can see, we have a 3-sider and a 5-sider over here. Easiest way to fix this up is either using the collapse, which unfortunately is not an option in this case, or we could just basically cut from here to this vertice and hit return. And that actually strike that. I'm sorry about that. From here to the middle of this, that's the way it was supposed to be. So now this is a 5-sider, this is a 4-sider, this is a 4-sider, this is a 4-sider, and that's basically all we would need to do in that case. Then to basically fix up this hole, you select your vertex, and one tool that we really haven't had to use before, but we're going to use now, target weld. And what this does is if you click and drag this vertice to where you want it to be welded to, it welds them together perfectly. And that's what we want. Just making sure that this is still at 0. Yes, it is. Okay, cool. So I think we're ready to the next step. So the next, just going to fix up this one little spot over here. That's the joys and sorrows of sometimes working in 3D. Sometimes you might miss a spot. So before you get to this last part, by the way, inspect your mesh just one last time to see if there's any weird anomalies or anything like that. In my case, nothing weirder than usual. I think I'm ready to go to the next step. So let's do this. Okay, I'd recommend someplace easier to get started, just so you can get an idea of how this would work. So I'm going to select my genes in this case. It wouldn't be a bad idea to isolate the genes, at least for now. And once the genes are properly isolated, once again, we're going to go to Edit, Duplicate Special, make sure that the scale is -1. Do not instance it in this case. We basically just want a pure duplicate special here. And it goes to the other side quite nicely. Again, whatever number you have here, because this is basically the number I have, just change that to a negative. Now, if it went over to the other side immediately, that's fantastic. But mine kind of went over this way because that's where the center of my thing was, so that's why it worked out that way. But nope, both of these are fine now. So the next step that we need to do is we need to combine these together. This is something we've done before. You click and drag both at the same time. This is one of the reasons why using the Show, Isolate, Select, View Selected is so helpful. The Mac has some different options, different shortcut key to get here, which is why I'm doing this manually. But anyways, I've selected them both, and I hit Combine. So now if I deselect and reselect, everything seems to be pretty good. Now, the last step, at least in going here, as long as you have made sure that all the vertices are at 0 on the X previously, this step is going to make the whole last bit of the process way easier. Because all we should need to do at this point is go to the vertex option, select all the middle vertices, like so. And we've done the weld a little bit before, at least I showed it off to some of y'all. But in case you need to see it again, Shift right click, merge vertices, and you're going to use the merge vertice option over here. Now, strongly recommend that you go to the settings box as you just saw, and to be honest, you want to use the smallest value possible. I found that the smallest that works well for me is 0.001, and then hit apply. Now, if everything works the way it's supposed to, if I was to go to any of these little vertexes, move this left to right, you'll notice that they are all connected. In fact, if I just go to the edge here, go left and right, all the edges should do that. This is what basic proper planning can really help out with. It wouldn't be a bad idea to double check a couple spots just to make sure everything is up to snuff. And I'm going to actually turn off the shading for the wireframe for now so we can take a look. Now the final test to make sure that everything is welded properly, because it looks a little bit jagged, if you go to Mesh Display, and there should be an option here called Soften Edge. Now what this does is it allows you to take a mesh that's currently selected, like what we have over here, and those little jagged edges we saw before, it's going to smooth them without actually adding a smooth modifier. It basically just makes it so that they all have the same shading group. In short, what's jagged now? Mesh Display, Soften Edge. Of course, it helps if you have it selected. Mesh Display, Soften Edge. Yeah, there we go. And as long as you don't see anything jagged, you're golden. And that's awesome. Alrighty. So we're going to do that again for the other parts. So once again, I turn off the Show Views Selected. I'm going to do the same thing for the shirt. So once again, going to go to Edit, Duplicate Special, make sure that the scale X is what's selected, which it currently is. Duplicate Special. Now again, because of where the middle point over here is, that's why it kind of copied the way that it did. But it's an easy enough fix to change. You just hit the negative in that area. It goes over to the other side pretty perfectly. Then with these both selected, just isolate these. Just take a moment to inspect to make sure that all the verts are connected together. In other words, you don't want anything holy. Cool. So everything looks good. So I can combine these. And once again, go to my front view. This makes this next process a lot easier. Now, if you can't do it all at the same time, don't worry about it. Just take your time, select all the middle verts. And remember, Control-Shift is your friend. That looks pretty good, though. So, if that's the way it is, I can hit Shift right click, merge vertices again. And again, just make sure that the value is the lowest it can be. As long as it's this low, you should be fine. Let me show you the reason why we do it this low. It's not so bad for bigger stuff like what you see over there, but if you have any areas that are really close together, even if I have a threshold of 1, check out the shenanigans here. Oh my, that is way more than I wanted. So, but even at a low value of 0.1, that can still cause some problems. Like there. Oof. I had a little bit of a heart attack there for a second. I was afraid it wasn't going to undo. But that's okay. That's why we always save beforehand. There we go. Okay, so yeah. I definitely will not mess around with this, but before I do, just want to make sure the whole thing is selected. And again, just only get the middle section. If you get anything else beyond the middle section, it can cause real problems later. Merge vertices, merge vertices. Yeah, this needs to go way down. So 0.001 should be small enough. And bam, we don't have this explode on ourselves this time. So, and again, one last final check because we want to make sure that this is actually properly welded together. You're going to select the mesh. Going to go to Mesh Display, Soften Edge, and hey, take a look at that. No shenanigans here. Fantastic. Okay, so the last part that I need to do, and most likely everyone else is going to need to do, is going to be the head. And just for the sake of keeping it consistent, I'm going to select the mesh, the arm over here. This part's unnecessary, but just a good idea, at least in my opinion. The arm is more organic anyways, so I'm going to go to Mesh Display, Soften Edge, and that just looks a lot less polygonal. That's a good thing. I'm going to leave the shoe the way that it is, though. But now getting to my head. Once again, I'm going to go to Edit, Duplicate Special, hit the Settings box, and duplicate that to the other side. And while I'm here, I might as well get actually the eye, because that's going to be kind of important. And again, I can go to the absolute movement on the other side, change that to a negative as well. Perfect. I don't really need the eye, but I figured since I'm here, I might as well get it. And, ooh, looks like there's some shenanigans going on down here. So that's one of the reasons why showing the selection can be so helpful. Oh yeah, definitely some shenanigans. But that's okay, because we have the time to basically fix this up. I'm going to do the same thing for the other side. Go to the vertex. Change that to a value over here. So that's all looking good. And I'm going to combine them like so. And once again, I'm going to select all my verts in the middle and only the middle. So the other two weren't too bad. This is where it gets a little bit tricky because trying to select these parts individually can be troublesome. So you might have to do it a little by little. Control-Shift is your friend when you do this. Just take a moment to make sure that the entire area was selected. And in this case, it definitely was not the case. Okay, so oh, looks like I missed a spot. I think that's it. Let's give this a let's give this a try. Once again, going to Shift right click, merge vertices, settings box, and hit apply. Again, lowest value 0.001 should be sufficient. I would double check all your mesh just to make sure. Well, it doesn't look like there's any weird shenanigans going on here. Again, it might not be a bad idea to double check by just... And the way that I'm doing this, by the way, is I'm selecting an edge, just double click there. If I go back and forth and the entire thing moves, I'm golden. So far, at least for the top area, seems pretty golden there. You might not see the bottom part of your lip happen because they're not really connected, so don't worry too much about that. But now I'm here, I can go back and forth, perfect. No problems. Okay, that is done there. Now we're not quite done with all the modeling yet. There's a couple spots we couldn't really get before, but now that we have the geometry welded together, we could do that. But before that, we still have some other areas in unfinished business. So for example, the arm and the boot. Now, this is what I recommend for these areas. Any areas that are kind of floating like this, like the arm that we have, you're going to start in a similar fashion. You're going to go to Edit, Duplicate Special, make sure that it's duplicated onto the other side. Now, this one was fortunate because the center of this was right over here anyway, so I didn't have to do anything special. This went exactly where it was supposed to, and I'm figuring the boot is, well, similar to what we had before. But that's okay. I hit apply for the duplicate special. Again, the scale for the X, aka the first number, should be -1. All I would need to do at this point is just bring that to the other side like so. Now, my recommendation for these free-floating areas, the ones that aren't connected in the middle, still combine them. Here's the reason why. When we eventually get into skinning, what we do for one side in terms of basically telling Maya what details need to be on one side versus the other, the easier this ends up being. So I'm going to do the same thing here. Select both of these and use the combine. And that's it. I don't need to stitch anything. I don't need to weld anything. But when eventually we get to skinning, what I do for one arm will happen to the other. And again, as long as they were made the way that we did, you should be in good shape. Okay. Now just the last details, as I said before, we basically want to make it so that if there's any open sleeves and whatnot, we fix these now while it's low poly. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select this open area. Just bringing this down just a smidge, not too far down. Ooh. Yep. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hold Shift while moving this down, and it's making an extrusion so that most people will most likely not be able to see in the inside of those spots. Now, if you notice that there's areas that are kind of open, you can always close those up yourself. I'm going to do the same thing for this part of the shirt. Just select the edge option, double click. That should get both sides, which it does. Once again, I'm going to use the extrude by selecting the scale, hold Shift, and I can bring this in, and bam. So again, no one can see the inside of our mesh. This is similar to what they've done in certain game models, particularly if the person has either like a dress, a kilt, or some sleeves. They go in a similar fashion in some game models this way to make sure that people can't see stuff. Now, I'm going to do the same thing over here. The only thing I have to make sure that I do is I turn on my symmetry. Select the edge option. Now I'm going to scale this in. You can even bring this down a little bit if you want. Actually, I'm pretty good. Basically just wrapping these last parts up. Okay, now before I do the last part, I am going to save. And I need to do this for the inside of the mouth too. Now I'm doing this on the inside of the mouth over here for a reason. Basically, we want to make an inside of the mouth for our person. I'm going to turn off the symmetry, by the way. Yep, there we go. And what we'll do here is just do a simple extrusion. Now I'm just going to hold Shift while moving. This is just going to bring this in a little bit, and I can use the scale to bring this in a little bit like so. But the reason, not so much like that, but like this, there we go. So it adds a little bit of extra flesh for our person. Yeah, making that look a lot nicer. Then I'm gonna, so that's the first extrusion. Second extrusion, I'm bringing this out and up. This will be the first part of our mouth. Although I am going to bring out this area. This is like, now yours might be a little different, so you might not need to do what I'm doing. I'm just bringing this up a little bit so this is a little bit straighter. And out a little bit like this. Ooh. Actually, I'm going to do it by the edge. Now there we are. I'm bringing this back, flattening this at this point a little bit more. Bringing this out and up a little bit. And then extruding this straight back. Now, you usually shouldn't have to fill this up. But just this enough, or just this amount, should make it so that if anyone was to look inside the mouth, at least there's something more than, well, pretty much nothing. And we don't have to get too crazy with this. Eventually, if you did want to add more details, like for example, if you're doing a mouth commercial or if the inside of a person's mouth is important, then yes, obviously you could add more stuff into it. But at least for now, that's unnecessary. So that is a good chunk of what we have to do. We're almost at the finish line, ladies and gents. The last part that we have to do, and this is just my recommendation, is I would strongly recommend taking a moment to smooth this. Currently, we're at no polygonal limit, and at least for my character, the poly count currently is very conservative, 2,850. Now, that's not including the hair. In fact, I'll actually bring up the hair to see how that comes up. But I can guarantee that it's not going to really bring it up that much. So I don't need this anymore, so I'm going to, I'll just move this out of the way. So let's see. There we are. Okay. So this is my character at this time. So overall, even with the hair, it's still pretty low, 4,000. So yeah, they were getting to about maybe PlayStation 2 type of character at this time. Maybe PlayStation 3. So yeah, smoothing some parts out is not going to be that big of a problem. Before I do that though, I'm going to save this as, in my case, week 7, I'm going to call this low poly. And I'm going to make a version that's going to be called high poly. Now this is the reason why I'm doing it this way. If for some reason something happens, I still have my low poly model that I could always go back to. But at this point, because of how everything is, I can just, before anything else, wouldn't be a bad idea to delete your history. So if you haven't done that in a while, just go to Edit, Delete by Type, History. The less stuff that we have here now, the easier things are going to be later. Plus, I wanted to actually keep the details for the smoothing, just in case something happens. So, selected everything, deleted my history. So I'm going to actually do this to my pants. So I'm going to smooth that out. Look at that. That geometry is going to make things much smoother for the actual skinning process itself. Going to do the same thing for the shirt. Just going to give this a little bit of a smooth. Yeah, that looks way better. The arms, that's definitely getting the smooth. That should definitely help in those sections. I'm going to smooth the face, obviously. That helps out. Whoa, that definitely helped out a lot. Still probably can make some adjustments to the lips, but that shouldn't be too difficult. And again, there's something that says that you can't continue to make adjustments and changes. I'm actually going to move those eyes back a little. Perfect. I'm loving this. I love it when a plan comes together. The hair I'm actually going to leave alone for now. I'm actually pretty happy with where those are. But I think I can adjust the lips a little bit more. For the boots, let's see how these look. So smoothing. Okay, smoothing is definitely the way to go here. I'm definitely liking how that's coming. Now again, the smoothing should be the last thing you should do in this whole process. I wouldn't recommend doing this any sooner. The main reason why I wouldn't recommend doing this any sooner is because, again, all that stuff that we did in terms of merging the one side to the other, you would have to basically do quadruple the work to basically make that happen. So yeah, I definitely would not recommend doing that earlier than when we just did this now. So that's going to be one of the last processes. And at least for my model, to give you an idea of my poly count currently, it's about 13,000. So if we're taking a look at current video game resolution, this is still working. This is still pretty workable. This could easily could have been put in a PlayStation 3 game if we wanted to. But yeah, I think we're okay for now. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. So as long as you get to this point, we should be able to go on to the next topic for this class, but we'll save that for next time. You have a lot of stuff that needs to be done to get to this point. So again, if you do have any questions, do take a moment to email me, contact me. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. So again, hopefully you found this useful, and that's pretty much where we're going to end it right now. Have a good one.